There is a life lesson that we can learn from Joseph. That's why he made it into the Bible. And there are many chapters devoted to telling about Joseph because what he did was so remarkable. Joseph was one of the 12 sons of Jacob, or Israel. And here we have the family tree. Jacob had 2 wives. He had Leah. Leah was his first wife, although she wasn't the one that he wanted to marry. He wanted to marry Rachel, who was the younger. Says she was well favored. So she was a beautiful woman. And so he wanted her to be his wife. She was the younger. And Laban, their father, didn't give Rachel to Jacob right away. He sort of tricked him into getting Leah, put the veil on Leah, marriage ceremony, and behold, it was Leah. Ah! But anyway, Leah was a wonderful wife, a wonderful woman, and she bare him 6 sons. What a treasure. The first son was Reuben. Reuben was the first son, and then Simeon and Levi. Judah was the 4th son. Now, Judah is the one through whom the Christ line would come. Then what happened is Rachel was barren during this time, and so she wanted to have sons desperately. So what she did is she gave Bilhah, her handmaid, to Jacob to wife, because in that culture, if the handmaid had a child, then it would belong to the owner, who was Rachel, legally. So Bilhah had 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali, and then Leah wasn't about to get beat out by Rachel, so she did the same thing. She gave Zilpah, her handmaid, to Jacob to wife, and Zilpah had 2 more sons, Gad and Asher, and then Leah had 2 more sons, Issachar and Zebulun, and then finally Rachel gave birth, and the first son she gave birth to was Joseph. And then she died in childbirth while giving birth to the 12th son, Benjamin. But have you ever heard of the tribe of Joseph? No. The tribe of Joseph does not exist. His 2 sons, though, made up tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. You see down here at the bottom. So this is the family tree. Now, Rachel was Jacob's favorite wife. And so the firstborn of Rachel was Joseph. And so because of that, Genesis 37:3 says, Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, but also he was the firstborn of his favorite wife, Rachel. And so he made a coat of many colors. Now, this means that Joseph was the heir. This was the heirship coat. Now, normally it would be a ceremonial thing, but he gave it to him ahead of time so he could wear it and show everybody, even though he was the younger, he is the heir. Of course, when his brethren saw their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, and they could not speak peaceably unto him. It was a big contention in that family. And Joseph was a great man, started out with adeptnesses at understanding revelation, and he dreamed a dream and he told his brethren. Now, sometimes when you get revelation, you shouldn't say it. And he was still young, wet behind the ears, and he told his brethren, and they hated him even more because he said, look, let me tell you about this dream. He says, we were binding sheaves in the field, and my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about and made obeisance to my sheep. They bowed down to him, and they said, are you going to reign over us? Are you going to have dominion over us? No way, Jose. And they hated him yet more for his dreams and for his words. And then he dreamed another dream, and he told it to his brethren again. He said, behold, I dreamed a dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed down to me. And he told it to his father and to his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream that you dream? Shall I, the sun, and thy mother, the moon, And thy brethren indeed come, bow down to yourselves to the earth? And his brethren envied him. But his father observed the saying, because, his father was a man of God, received revelation too, and God said, that's going to happen. So, that was really something. So Joseph was the manager of the family. And he would go out and manage all the brethren when they were out in the field working. So there was one time that Jacob said to Joseph, go out in the field. I want you to find out what's going on with all the sons. They've been off, and who knows where they are. So he went to where they were supposed to be, and they weren't there. Because normally, when you are handling the flock and you find that the forage area is not good, the grass or whatever is not good in the area where you told the manager where you were going to go, then you'd send a messenger back and say, hey, we're going to go over to some other place because this place is no good. They didn't care. They didn't send a messenger to Joseph to let him know. So when his father told him to go out, he went out to where he thought they were, and they weren't there. And so he was wandering around the field looking for him, and some stranger says, hey, they're in Dothan. They're someplace else. So Joseph went to where they were, and in Genesis 37:18, when they saw him afar off, even before he came near to them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said to one another, behold, here comes this dreamer. Come now, therefore, let's slay him and cast him into a pit. And we'll say some evil beast has devoured him, and then we're going to see what's going to happen because of these dreams. Now, Reuben heard it. Now, Reuben was the firstborn of Leah, okay? And one of the duties of the firstborn would be he would represent the kids. He was responsible, okay? And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands. So they didn't kill him, because he said, let's not kill him. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood. Let's cast him into this pit that's here, and don't lay a hand on him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. So what he was trying to do is diffuse the situation, okay? Just let him cool out in this pit for a while, and then his intent was to return him back to his father unharmed. And it came to pass when Joseph was come to his brethren, they stripped him of his coat of many colors. They took him, cast him into a pit, and that pit was empty. There wasn't any water in it. And then they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices and balm and myrrh, and they were going to carry it down to Egypt for trading purposes. And Judah said to his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and his brethren were content. So they sold him to these Midianites, these Ishmaelites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted him up out of the pit, sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. And he returned to his brethren and said, the child is not. And what am I going to do? Well, then they made up this story and told their father that Joseph had died. Of course, their father was heartbroken. Well, how would you like to be Joseph? Did you deserve this? Did you have any control over your birth order? Okay. I mean, he could have been a little bit wiser and not told them those dreams. But, I mean, how would you feel if you were Joseph and you were sold into slavery? You might be pretty angry about it, right? Might be pretty angry about it. Well, what happened in Genesis 39, Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard. So he was like the Secretary of Defense. He was a high-ranking dignitary in the Egyptian government. And he bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph. And he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw the Lord was with him, and the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And so Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. And Potiphar made him the steward of his house. And all that he hath, all that Potiphar hath, he put under the jurisdiction of Joseph. And it came to pass from that time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had. The Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. Now, why was this so? Did the Lord do this simply because Joseph was an icon? You know, Joseph appeared in the house and all of a sudden, the blessing is there. No. It happened because of what was in Joseph's heart. You see, Joseph could have been bitter. Joseph could have been angry. He could have let this whole negative situation eat him up. Would the Lord have been with him if that had occurred? No. Would the Lord be blessing him and the Egyptian house if Joseph was all bound up in bitterness and hatred and vengeance over what happened to him? Did he deserve to be enslaved? Did he do anything wrong? No. But Joseph put the right foot forward, and so God blessed him. And the Potiphar, verse 6, left all that he had in Joseph's hand. And he didn't even know how much he had, except the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a handsome person and well-favored. He was muscular. He was just a man's man. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." But he refused. He said to his master's wife, "Behold, my master does not know what's with me in the house, and he's committed all that he has to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" But it came to pass, she spake to Joseph day by day, and he hearkened not to her, to lie by her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was nobody else in the house. And she caught him by his garment and said, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out. And it came to pass when she saw that she had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, and now she had evidence. She didn't like to be jilted by what Joseph had done. So she called the men of her house, spake to them, saying, "He's brought in this Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice." Did that happen? No. And it came to pass when he heard, he lifted up my voice and cried. He left his garment with me. He fled and got up. She laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. She spake to him according to those words, saying, "The Hebrew servant which you brought unto us came in to mock me." And it came to pass as I lifted up my voice and cried that he left his garment with me and fled out. So it came to pass when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, "After this manner did thy servant to me," he got angry, and Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in prison. So this was the worst kind of prison to be in, where the king's prisoners were bound. Would you have a right to be angry if you were Joseph? Would you have a right to be all wrought up with rage and want revenge? But, verse 21, the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Now, did that just simply happen because Joseph was there? No. It happened because he was doing the right thing. He was handling the situation properly. Verse 22, and the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, that whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. So he was a model prisoner. And the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with Joseph, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper, even in the prison. So again, Joseph was able to handle the evil that had occurred to him undeservedly and didn't get all bent out of shape. Even to the point in Genesis 40 verse 1, it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt. You know, they'd lost the ace of cakes competition. An iron chef. Anyway, and so the Pharaoh was wroth against his two officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers, and he put them in ward in the house, in prison, in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continued a while in prison. And so, the butler and the baker had dreams. And Joseph found out about this, and so he interpreted their dreams. And first he interpreted the dream for the butler. Now, if you were all vengeant, if you were all angry, if you were all bent out of shape because something happened to you undeservedly, are you going to get revelation? Are you going to have a calm, quiet seas in your heart where you're going to get revelation from God? Man, look at the principles that Joseph applied, even though all those negative situations happened to him. He had every right to be angry, right? He had every right to expect vengeance. But what did he do? He handled it in the right way. And so he was able to get revelation. So Joseph said to the butler, this is the interpretation of your dream. The 3 branches in your dream are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up your head and restore you to your place, and shall deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner when it was with the butler. But think of me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me to Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. Because Pharaoh was the only one who could give a pardon to anyone that was in jail, to get him out of jail. Verse 15, for indeed I was kidnapped away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. And so he probably explained what had happened to the butler. And he said, look, when things go well with thee, mention my plight to Pharaoh. Okay? Because that was the only way for him to get out, would be for him to mention his plight to Pharaoh. But you know what? The chief butler forgot. So how would you like to be Joseph? Stuck in prison. Because you didn't do what you were an innocent man. Stuck in prison. And your only way out so far has come to naught. Would you be sad? Would you be bitter? Would you be vengeant? Would you be angry? Certainly would be a temptation to do that, wouldn't it? Definitely. Well, 2 years later, 2 whole years later, Pharaoh dreamed a dream. And behold, he stood by the river, and there came up out of the river 7 well-favored cattle, fat-fleshed, and they fed in the meadow. And behold, 7 other cattle came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other cattle upon the brink of the river. And the sick ones ate up the good ones. Woo! And Pharaoh awoke. That was a bad dream. Ooh. And he went back to sleep again. He slept and dreamed the second time. Behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk. Have you ever seen that? You farmers, you're lucky if you get 2, right? 7 came up on one stalk. Rank and good. And behold, the 7 thin ears, and then there were 7 thin ears also blasted with the east wind that sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ones. And again, Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. It came to pass in the morning, his spirit was troubled. He sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. And the Pharaoh told him the dream, and nobody knew what it meant. No one knew what it meant. And then the butler remembered. Remember that? The butler remembered and said, Pharaoh, there's this guy in the prison, and he interpreted my dream, and it came to pass. So Pharaoh sent, verse 14, Genesis 41, called Joseph. They brought him hastily out of the dungeon. But he said, wait a minute, I got to take care of myself. He shaved himself and changed his raiment so he didn't look like somebody who'd been in the prison for 2 years, whatever. And then he came into Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I've dreamed a dream, and there's none that can interpret it. And I've heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And so Pharaoh told him what the dream was. And then in verse 25, Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God has showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. See, God has foreknowledge. God knows what's going on. You know, he's not up there saying, duh, what shall I do? You know, he's not up there giving educated guesses about what's going to happen. You know, that would only be 3 knowledge instead of 4 knowledge, or maybe 3.5 knowledge. But anyway, no, God knew what was going on. And so he told the 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good years are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty years blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh that God's about to do, that he's going to show to Pharaoh. There will be 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. And all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine that shall consume the land, and the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of the famine that follows, because it's going to be bad. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It's because it's established, and it's going to happen pretty quick. Now therefore Pharaoh should look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. And let Pharaoh do this. Let him appoint officers over the land. Take the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years, and let them gather all the food of those good years that come. Lay up the corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. Because, 7 years of famine is a long time. You might be able to get by with 1 or 2, but 7, that's bad. And so the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? Pharaoh said to Joseph, forasmuch as God has showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as you. You shall be over my house. According to thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I've set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took his signet ring that he signs his checks with, and put it upon Joseph's hand, arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain around his neck, and made him to ride in the 2nd chariot which he had. And they cried before him, bow the knee, and he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. Joseph became the 2nd most rich man and the 2nd most powerful man in the entire world, the vice president, the grand vizier of Egypt. Now in that culture, the vice president did all the work, and the president took an extended vacation. In our culture in the United States, it's the other way around. The president does all the work, and the vice president takes the extended vacation. Right? He just travels all over and just does all this stuff. Okay? Joseph, because he had handled everything right, because he was not bitter in his heart, because he was not angry and vengeful, because he didn't treasure that up and it ate him all up, he was able to handle what happened to him, even though none of it, he didn't deserve any of it, did he? But he handled it right. What a life lesson. That's why he made it into the Bible. How many of you could do that? How many of you, if you were thrown in a pit and thrown into slavery, would react the way that Joseph did? How many of you, if you were accused unjustly and put in jail, would react like Joseph did? How many of you, if you tried your best shot to get out of there and the darn butler forgot, how many of you would not be tempted to be bitter and victimized? Man, Joseph is just a tremendous example of how to handle adversity. You know, he knew how to give it to God and let God handle all that. Because could he do anything to affect vengeance? No. Genesis 42, when Jacob saw there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, "Why are you looking at each other?" He said, "Behold, I heard there's grain in Egypt. Get over there, buy us some." So they left Benjamin, his favorite son, back in Canaan and sent his 10 brothers down to buy grain. And so they went there. And when they got there, Joseph recognized them. And they were buying the grain. And so he remembered the dream, it says. And in the dream, all of his brothers were bowing down to him. Here, there were only 10 brothers present. He said, "If you're really true," and they said, no, we're not spies. No, we're not spies. You know, our father's back there, and there's 11 of us, and there's a 12th guy, and we don't know what happened to him. And he said, "Look, if this is true, if this is a true story, and you're not spies, then what you got to do is give me somebody as a hostage, and then you guys go back and get the other brother and bring him back here, and then it'll prove that you're telling me the truth." You know, and they said, "Oh no." And here they are, they're talking amongst themselves in Hebrew, and so Joseph is talking to them through an interpreter. In verse 20, he says, "Bring your youngest brother to me, so shall your words be verified, and you won't die." And they did so. And they said one to another, "We're very guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul," Joseph's soul, "when he besought us that, and we would not hear. Therefore, this distress has come upon us." You know, the chickens are coming home to roost. It's because we sinned so bad that now we're in trouble. It's coming back on us. And Reuben, the eldest, said to them, "Didn't I tell you, don't sin against the child, that you wouldn't hear? Behold, his blood is required." But they didn't know that Joseph was there understanding them. They thought he was the right-hand man of the Egyptian Pharaoh, because he spoke to them in an interpreter. They didn't know who Joseph was, and he was hearing them. Now, sometimes when God works vengeance, when God works justice, sometimes you're not involved. You know, we would like to be, right? We would like to be when that occurs. It happened in this case, but usually it doesn't happen in this case. So what happened? They went back, they got Benjamin, they came back, and in the process of time, Joseph could not refrain himself before all of them that stood by him, and he cried, "Get everybody out of here, just me and them." And Joseph made himself known to his brethren. Can you imagine? Joseph said to his brethren, he was speaking in Hebrew this time, not in Egyptian, "I am Joseph. Does my father yet live?" And his brethren could not answer them, for they were troubled at his presence. And Joseph said to his brethren, "Come near to me, I pray you." And they came near, and he said, "I'm Joseph, your brother, who you sold into Egypt. Don't be grieved or angry with yourselves that you sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life." Because Joseph had his head in the right place, he was able to understand what stood behind all the events that had gone on. And so what happened was he sent back, brought Jacob and all of the people that were with him from Canaan into Egypt. and gave them the best land in the Nile Delta and gave them provisions, everything they needed, because Joseph was the vice president. And so then Joseph continued to live, and Jacob, his father, died. And when Jacob died, the sons got scared, and they said, well, verse 15 of Genesis 50, when Joseph's brethren saw their father was dead, they said, Joseph will hate us and will certainly requite us all the evil which we did unto him. And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, thy father did command before he died, saying, so shall ye say to Joseph, forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren and their sin, for they did unto thee evil, and now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph wept when they spoke unto him. And see, Joseph did forgive them. You see, it is a really trying situation when evil occurs. There is evil in the world, right? The world is owned by an evil landlord. And like the bumper sticker says, stuff happens. Okay? You can't sometimes stop it from happening. So what happens if you get tangled up in evil? You know, you've heard of the cue ball effect, right? The adversary starts stuff in motion and things happen. Well, in the Bible, they didn't have any pool tables. So that they didn't explain it as the cue ball effect. But they did have pools of water in the Old Testament, of course. And waters are analogized to the adversary's kingdom. He starts waves in motion. And what happens when evil occurs? Waves go out, right? One person's affected and they get angry, and then another person's affected and they get angry, and another person's affected, right? And it's just like a wave. It just goes on and on and on. And sometimes we get caught up in that stuff. Sometimes we get injured. And, you know, it's a real big temptation to react in kind, isn't it? It's a real big temptation. But, you know, if we do that, then we're just continuing on the adversary's work. Sometimes, you know, people bear grudges, they are angry, they treasure up rage and bitterness for years. You know? And if that happens, they're actually doing a better job of attacking themselves than the adversary could. They're doing his work for him. Just keeping those waves going. It's like they have their own personal whirlwind in a box. This is my anger. It's my pain. I have a right to be angry. But God says, let it go. God says, let it go. Hebrews chapter 12 says, follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord. Looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. And that's what bitterness does. Bitterness hurts the vessel that contains it far more than anything it could be poured out on. Romans chapter 12, verse 17 says, recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it's possible, as much as lies in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourself, but rather give place unto wrath. Just let it go. Give place. Vengeance is mine. I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy, and this is talking about an enemy in the body, it's talking about an enemy among brethren in context. If your enemy, feed him. If he thirsts, give him drink, for in so doing, you'll warm him with your love. Remember that Orientalism that stands behind that? Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. You see, if we do the adversary's work and continue on the waves, we're not going to get delivered. God says, let it go. God says, give it to me. God says, forgive and be healed. Because forgiveness benefits the forgiver far more than the forgivee. Sometimes the forgivee is off somewhere else. He never knows. They never know. But if you let it go, then you stop the cue ball effect. When God does vengeance, the way He does it is that when it's done, the waves stop. The cue ball effect stops. Because, if we try vengeance, we'll probably screw it up. Right? When we try it, we'll probably screw it up. So how does this all work? Remember Job? When did Job get delivered? When he prayed for his friends. That's not just saying words. He meant it. He believed for his friends. And what did God do? Job 42, the Lord turned the captivity of Job when he prayed for his friends and paid him the insurance policy. The Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Then there came unto him all his brethren and all his sisters and all they that had been his acquaintance before, even his friends. And they did eat bread with him in his house and bemoaned him and comforted him over all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him, or permitted to be brought. That's a Hebrew idiom of permission. Verse 12, so the Lord blessed the latter end of Job more than his beginning, with Jacob and Joseph. Joseph also got double. Because what happened is, Israel, his father, in Genesis 48, gave the blessing upon his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And verse 15, he blessed Joseph and said, God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God which fed me all my life along until this day. Verse 16, the angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless these lads, and let my name be named on them. He adopted Joseph's two sons as his own. And instead of having one blessing going to the tribe of Joseph, two blessings go. One to Ephraim and one to Manasseh. God insurance policy pays double. That's how it works. Turn to Joel. In Joel, this is after all the evil happened to Israel. After Nebuchadnezzar, I think, all these crazy... No, but it's after all the evil happened to Israel. In Joel chapter 2, verse 12, he says, therefore also know, saith the Lord, turn ye even to me with all your heart. Don't keep a tornado in there. Don't keep bitterness in there. Don't keep something that you think you got to keep. Turn to me with your whole heart, and with fasting and weeping and mourning. Verse 13, and rend your heart, not your garments, and turn unto the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and of great kindness, and repents him of the evil. Who knoweth if a man will return and repent and leave a blessing behind him, even a meat offering and a drink offering unto the Lord your God? And in verse 25, God says, and I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten, the cankerworm and the caterpillar, and the palmer worm, and my great army which I permitted to be sent among you. And you'll eat in plenty and be satisfied. He'll pay you double. So the life lesson we learned from Joseph is he was able to handle the evil that had happened to him in the proper way. And look what God did for him. Bless you.